Okay, time is up. All right. Although you can keep writing, I don't really care. But I'm gonna move on with the lecture now. Okay, so this is week 2 of MYT Photography. So if you weren't here last week, hopefully you got caught up by listening to the screencast. Okay, because I'm not really gonna go over that material again. I will assume that now exposure triangle is, you guys pretty much have it down. Okay, but we will review slightly. You guys will review amongst yourselves today. Okay, so this is the agenda for today. We're going to review the quiz that you just took, and I'll show some of the homework kind of pictures that you guys submitted, and then we'll review the exposure triangle, and then I have a bunch of topics for you guys. A lot of them, so you can think of it this way. So the first week we spent a lot of times doing theory, okay, kind of like abstract ideas about exposure triangle and brightness, and we worked with numbers in our head and things like that. Okay, but week 2 is, okay, well, how does that actually manifest itself inside a camera, right? And so how do I actually get a picture that's properly lit inside my camera? Okay, so understanding how the camera works, that's week 2. Okay, so I have 70 slides, that I want to do with you guys today. Probably won't get through all of them, but that's okay. Okay, so we're going to try to get through as much of it as possible. Okay, and I guess Kevin Ho is joining our class. All right. Okay, so let's go over the quiz. You can grade your own. Okay, I'm not going to collect these or anything. This is just for you guys to measure how well you're grasping the material. Okay. So number 1, right? The 1 through 3, I gave you different situations, right? And I asked you to maintain the exposure, or kind of if you want to change the exposure in a certain way, then what settings do you have to choose? Okay. So the first one, the shutter speed that is correct, it should be 1/500 seconds. Okay. So the shutter speed won't change. Number 2 should be ISO 800. Okay, ISO 800. So the aperture, right, got brighter. You're going brighter by 1 stop, and then the shutter speed got darker by 2 stops. So then you have to increase your ISO by 1 stop in order to maintain the same brightness. Okay, number 3 should be 1/120 seconds. Okay. 1/120. Okay, number 4, true or false? f2.8 has a larger, wider depth of field than f6.3. Who says it's false? Okay, all right, great. That is the correct answer. All right, number 5. Number 5, larger aperture means you have, okay, there's a bunch of things you could have said, right? Either larger hole to let light in through. It means a small f number. It means less depth of field. Okay, any of those. Okay. And number 6, hard or soft? Hard, soft, soft. Okay. And then number 7, your shutter speed. Remember, the crop factor, you multiply the focal length on the lens by the crop factor to get the effective focal length, which is 80 millimeters, and then you take the reciprocal of that, so 1/80 seconds. Okay. Number 8, what is the negative side effect of high ISO? Grain or noise. Okay. And then number 9 and 10, I don't know why I don't have it in my slides, but the answers should be the side effect of high aperture, low f number, is a small or narrow depth of field. Okay. And then the side effect of a long shutter speed is blur. Okay, motion blur. Alright, so if you scored yourself out of 10, I just want to know how many people got 7 or higher. 7 or higher. Alright, okay, sounds good. 7 or higher would be a really good score. That's really good, okay? So I just want to see, okay. Alright, so that's done with that. We're done with the quiz for now. I'm going to pass around this attendance sheet. Okay, so can you just check off your email? Okay, so before we get into the material, I want to go through some of. I just quickly looked through some of the submissions that you guys had, and I just chose out some interesting pictures. Okay, so thank you to the ones who did submit the homework. Okay, if you didn't, you know, that's okay. I mean, it's it's for you guys to learn. So hopefully, in the future, you can find time to submit. Okay, submit the homework. Okay. So here's one of front lighting. It was interesting. There's a whole series of these. That was kind of cute. Okay, and then here's one of side lighting. All right. I'm pretty sure this wasn't a self-portrait. So, by Kwong. Okay. And then I like this one. It's backlit. I mean, the subject is great, but then it's actually really well lit. This picture is really well lit without any like parts that are too overexposed or too underexposed. So I really like that lighting. And then this was one that Irene submitted, was her favorite picture. I think it's a really good picture. So I just decided to include that there. Okay, so now to, I think there was some confusion on how to submit homework. So I made a video, okay, on how I want you guys to submit your homework, okay? So hopefully this will clarify things. I realize that I don't have speakers, so I'm just going to talk over the video, but it's going to...
Tutorial on how I want you to submit your homework assignment.
Okay, so I'll put this online too, but
first you're gonna upload your
basically you need to, okay, so first you're going to upload your pictures, right, into Flickr. Okay, so we'll just wait until, alright, so you choose whatever pictures you want to upload. Hopefully you guys were able to figure that out. Okay. I didn't have time to edit this out because I made this morning. Okay, so you want to, okay, the first thing you need to do is after you upload whatever pictures you're going to submit, you need to add that to a set, okay? So your own set on your own Flickr. Okay, I want you to label it like MYT Week 1 or MYT Week 2 or something, okay? So make sure all of your, they're not just on your photo stream, but they're actually in a set, okay? So create set and then done. Some of your uploaders might not look like this, okay, but I mean the process is similar. Just you need to create a set. Okay. Okay, so now once you're done, you should have a set, right? That set that you just created. Now what you're going to do is you're going to go to one of those pictures. Okay? Go to one of those pictures, and then under actions, you should be able to add to a group. Okay, and then just add that to our MYT Photography 2012 group. Okay.
If you click on that, it's going to add. So now, when I go to
Right, so then this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to go to the Flickr group, and I can see your one photo submission. Okay, I click on that picture, and then I'll be able to see your whole set because it'll tell me what sets this picture is in. Okay, so you don't need to submit all of them. I just need you to submit one. Okay, so it doesn't get flooded. Okay, so if you're submitting like 6 or 7 or later on maybe like 10 pictures, it's just going to be all your pictures, and it's going to be hard for me to go through different people's. Okay, so just submit one to the group. Okay. All right. Hopefully that makes things clear about the homework. Okay. All right. So the next step in the plan is for you guys to review the exposure triangle. Okay. So I want you to pair up with someone next to you and just together talk through what the 3 elements are, what the main effects of them are, and what the side effects are. Okay. So I'll give you about 5 minutes to make sure you kind of have that in your mind because we're going to use that today. Okay? So go ahead and do that right now.
Are you going to meet at Kaufman?
Huh?
Are you going to meet at Kaufman
Next week? Oh, next week's when we're all at Kaufman, huh? Well, were you guys able to get rooms?
Yeah, I don't know yet.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, I'm still waiting. Actually, you know what? I could probably check that now, but I don't know if I'll have an answer for you by today.
I mean, it'd be nice to just do, because I do have lecture planned, and I wanted to get through like lectures 3 and 4 before I do the lab.
Okay, let me see if I can find out.
Okay.
You good?
Yeah.
All right, so you never requested a speaker in a stand,
Yeah,
so I
I
didn't
should,
give you one.
yeah,
You're okay?
Yeah,
All right.
we're good. All right, it's been 5 minutes. Hopefully you guys were able to review all 3 elements. Okay, so this is basically the most succinct summary of the exposure triangle I could find in one slide. Okay, so each of the slides you'll find examples of what that setting looks like, and then as you go on either side you have different side effects. Okay, so this is something you guys can refer to later on in the slides if you need to review exposure triangle. Okay, so were there any questions that came up from that time of discussion? Like something you weren't sure of? Yes.
For aperture, you were saying something about how you, as you increase or lower aperture, which is increase f stop, you're letting more light, or how does light come into aperture?
So aperture, so when I say I'm increasing my aperture, that's referring to the size of the hole. Okay, so if I'm increasing my aperture, I'm letting in more light because the hole's getting bigger, right? The side effect of that is that as the hole gets bigger, my depth of field gets smaller. Okay, so the primary effect is that I'm letting in more light. The side effect that you get is this depth of field thing. Okay.
So are they all functions of light?
They all have to do with light, right? I mean, the only one, so shutter speed and aperture, that controls in how much light comes in. The ISO or sensitivity, that controls how much you amplify the given amount of light that's already in your camera. Okay? So, shutter speed and aperture control how much light come in. ISO controls your amplification of that. Okay. Yes?
Can you explain, like, stopping it up, what that equates to?
So when I say, you stop up or you go up one stop, right, that means to make it brighter by a stop. Right? So that means from any given setting, I can say my ISO doubles. If my ISO doubles, then I'm stopping up, right? One stop, right? If I double my ISO from 800 to 1600, I'm getting twice as much amplification of the light, so the image is getting twice as bright. Okay, if I make my shutter speed twice as long, then I'm also stopping up one, right? Because I'm letting in twice as much more light. Any other questions? I see a lot of cameras pointed at me. It's weird.
You're a star.
Oh my. Any other questions about exposure triangle? Okay. All right, so let's move on. So now the next topic that we're going to discuss is, okay, so you understand like how this exposure triangle thing works, okay, and theoretically how it works. But you have to understand how your camera sees light. Okay, so how does your camera, like when you put it on auto mode, right? How does your camera decide how bright this image is? Okay, so actually right now, if you look at your camera, set it on manual mode, right? Set it on manual mode. For a lot of your cameras, okay, so if you have a display on the top of your camera, okay, on the bottom of that display, you'll see kind of like a meter looking thing, and it has like -2, -1, 0, 1, 2. Okay, so some of you don't have that. If you look inside your viewfinder, you might see that. Okay, and so when you're on manual mode and you kind of point your camera in different directions, okay, on a certain setting, you're gonna see a little dial move around on that meter. Okay, you guys see that? Okay, maybe I can demo it. Okay, I'm talking about that -2, 1, +2 thing. Okay, this won't give me a live one. Dang it. Okay, anyways, you might see, this thing move like this. Okay? Or it might be stuck over here and it starts flashing, or it might be stuck over here and it starts flashing. Okay, so look for that on your camera. Okay. Oops. So that's basically telling you how bright the camera thinks the scene is. Okay, so the first thing I want to cover is how does your camera see light? Okay, so when I say camera metering, all I'm saying is how does your camera determine the correct exposure? Okay, or what it thinks is the correct exposure. Okay, and first thing you need to know is that your camera always wants to expose for a safe middle gray exposure. Okay, so for the more technical people, that's an 18% gray. Okay, it's an 18. That's exactly like what it tries to get at. So whatever scene it sees, it tries to set the exposure so it's at 18% gray, which basically in kind of layman's term is just a gray, right? Middle gray. Okay. So basically, if it's white, then it's too bright, and if it's black, then it's too dark. Okay. The second thing you need to note is that camera sensors can only detect reflected light. Okay. Remember we talked about reflected light versus incident light last week, right? So it doesn't know how bright like the fluorescent light in here is. it doesn't know how bright the sunlight is. Okay, it only knows how bright. So if I'm taking a picture of you guys, like the light bounces off you guys and then it comes at me, like how bright is that light? Okay. So now the problem with that is that different colors reflect different amounts of light. Okay, so someone wearing a black shirt, okay, reflects a lot less light than someone wearing a white shirt. Okay, even though they're standing in the same room and there's the same amount of light. Okay, so when your camera sees someone with a black shirt versus someone with a white shirt, it thinks that there's different amount of light, right? Which is obviously not the case. Okay, so that's why you'll maybe sometimes be in the same room, and some of your pictures will be overexposed, and some of your pictures might look underexposed. Okay, because your camera has no idea what's going on. Okay, it doesn't know how to read colors. Only reads the amount of light coming in. So, like I said, the color of an object will confuse the camera's metering system. Okay, so some really typical scenarios. Okay, the first one is snow. Okay, so when you're on a snow trip, if you're using auto, okay, all your pictures are going to be underexposed. Yes, underexposed. Okay, because it sees all the white and it thinks it's really, really bright. Okay, and so it tries to get snow to a middle gray, right? Even though snow is white, right? So the fact that the snow is middle gray in your picture means that it's actually underexposed, right? Unless you're going for that effect on purpose. Okay. Another one is if you're at a really bright sky, like if the sky is really bright, then the fact is that the sky is really bright, right? So in the picture it should be really bright, but your camera doesn't like that. Okay, so it's going to try to make that a middle gray. Okay, so everything is going to be underexposed in that picture. Okay. Stage. Okay, so stage. The reason I put stage in there is that often when you're putting a spotlight on someone, right, that person will be lit, but everything around them is black, right? And so your camera thinks it's really dark, so it needs to make that blackness gray. Okay, but that's overexposing the picture, making it way too bright. And so then the person that you're trying to take a picture of ends up being like, you know, like shining out light, like super overexposed. Okay, so that happens a lot. I've seen that happen a lot on our Flickr. And then graduations, right? Why would graduations be a problem? Yeah, everyone's wearing black gowns. Okay, so if you're using auto, you're overexposing because it thinks that, you know, it's really, really dark, even though it's just because everyone's wearing black. Okay, so you can see your camera's not that smart. Okay, your camera's programmed to do one thing, which is to take a safe middle gray exposure, and you have to be able to work around that. Okay, so which is why we're learning this. So ignore that second bullet for now. Okay, so here's an example of, this was straight out of the camera, right? And then this would be after post-processing, right? Brightening it up, or using exposure compensation, which we'll talk about. Okay, so this is more of a proper exposure, or what we would see in real life, rather than this. Okay, and plus you can see, right? Their faces are not lit, right? It's a little too dark. Okay, so this would be more realistic. So back to live demo mode. So I'm going to show you how this works on your camera. So you guys do agree with me that this room, like, just because I stand in different parts of the room, it's not like that much brighter or darker, right? So anywhere in this room, I should be using similar exposure settings, right? You guys agree? Not? Yes. Okay. Good. Okay. So now I'm going to show you what my camera tries to do, though. Okay. Oh, dang it! It won't let me. Okay. Anyways. All right. I'm pointing at that wall, which is mostly black, right? And it's getting a middle gray, so it's at shutter speed is 1/10, aperture is 5.0, and my ISO is 6400. So right now it's exposing for a really, really, really dark picture, right? My ISO is really high, right? Probably higher than some of your cameras go. And then my shutter speed is really slow, okay? So now if I switch it to this piece of paper as my subject, right? Right? You see the 5 stayed the same, but my ISO is 800 now, a lot lower, right? And my shutter speed is also 80, right? 8 times faster than it was before. So same amount of light, but I think the difference right here between what I had before and now is like 32 times different. Okay, so that's the margin of error that your camera is going to have if you just trust it. Okay, so you should not trust your camera in these kinds of extreme situations. Okay, you know, and this is with like a really expensive camera too. Okay, so like you can imagine a point and shoot is not going to do that much better. Okay, so there are ways to get around that, which we will cover. Okay, but before that, I want to continue covering how does your camera see light. Okay, so there are different camera metering modes. Okay, so on DSLRs, you should be able to click a button that has something that looks like this somewhere. Okay, so try to find that. And then, so if you press that button and you change your dial, then it'll give you kind of different settings that look like these icons right here. Some cameras have more than these, but these are kind of the three primary ones that I want to cover. Okay. So center weighted metering. So what that does is it looks at the whole picture that you're giving it, and it tries to measure like the brightness, right? And it tries to get that 18% gray, but it's going to give more weight to the center. Okay, it's like the middle, like 30% or something like that. I forget, but basically whatever's in the center gets more weight. Okay. The benefit of this setting is that it's predictable. Okay, every single time it just goes for an 18% gray. So now there's a different one called evaluative metering, right? On your cameras, these things might look different. You're gonna have to look at your manual. Okay, I can't put it up for every single camera, but evaluative metering, what that does is it reads the scene, it reads the brightness, and it tries to guess what kind of scene you're in. So there's kind of an algorithm on top of the simple 18% gray, and it tries to give you something that you want. So for example, like at a sunset, right, if it sees like really bright on the top and kind of darker on the bottom, it might try to guess that it's a sunset, right? And it might try to expose for the top part so that you actually get the sunset. Okay, so it tries to be smarter. In modern cameras, it does well in most situations. Okay, it does well in most situations. The downside to this is that it's less predictable. Okay, because you don't know what your camera is thinking on top of the 18% gray. Okay, so it's whatever the Canon and Nikon programmers decided to put into there. Okay, and try to guess based on the light. I tend to use center weighted metering just because it's more predictable, and I like to just be able to control everything. Okay, evaluative, you'll just have to kind of try it and see if that's something you like. Okay, spot metering. Now, if you look through your viewfinder, some of you will have a little circle around your middle focus point. You guys see that? A lot of you won't. If you don't, then just around that middle focus point, there's kind of a region, a more specific region that you can meter to. Okay, so if you choose spot metering, it's going to do 18% gray just in that middle portion. Okay, so instead of looking at the whole kind of picture that it would take, it will just look at the middle portion. So that allows you to be a little more selective on how you're going to meter or what you choose to meter on. Okay. So this is a little bit more of an advanced technique, right? So if you actually know what you're doing, you would use this to meter to a specific thing. Okay. Yes?
On my camera, I have a partial meter, which is same as evaluated metering minus the dot in the middle. You know what that is?
Yeah, partial, is that a Nikon?
It's a Canon.
Oh, it's a Canon?
Yeah.
Partial meter, I don't use it at all. So I wouldn't be able to, I think that's what it is. It's just
something between spot and
yeah, it's something between spot and center.
spot.
Yeah. But so it's another one of those things where it's if you learn to use it and it becomes predictable to you, then you can use it. Right? So the benefit to these is that you know how they're gonna behave. Right? This one is not as clear. Yeah.
So is it always for the center reading? Does it always have to be the center? Like, is there a way?
You can move that weighting? No. I don't think so.
So even if you change your manual, the auto focus point to one of the other spots outside, it'll still center weight in the center of the.
I don't know about like top level cameras, but for most entry level or mid range cameras, it's always the middle.
It's always
Yeah.
So if you do a partial focus on the, let's say we're doing center weighted, you do a partial focus and then you recompose, it's still metered to that original place,
Yes.
provided that you're half focused.
Right. Yeah. So yeah, what Kevin's getting at is like, oftentimes you'll focus and then you'll reframe, we'll kind of talk about that later too, but whenever you focus, that's also when it meters. Okay, so if you focus and then you reframe, it has already metered and decided what picture it's gonna take, okay, before you move it. But actually, that's something you can change. So if you have like a mid-range to a more advanced camera, then that can actually change to after focus too. So that gets into a little more kind of advanced technique. So this, there's no right or wrong answer to this. Okay, it just basically, you just need to know what they do, and you need to use what you're comfortable with. Okay, so I'm just telling you guys what's available. Any questions? Yeah.
Do you put on use spot metering if what you're like looking at is kind of neutral, like your shirt or something, but if like you wouldn't want to do like graduation because if the center is
Right, right. The graduation would be a very bad place to use spot metering. Right, yeah. So I sometimes use spot metering when I'm doing stage, because I know I want to ignore all that blackness around it and just expose properly for the person that I'm taking a picture of. Right? That might be a situation where I use spot metering, but I rarely use it. So, yeah.
Does metering matter if you're manual?
Metering does not matter. Oh, that's a good question. Okay, so metering, how your camera uses it is if you're in a partial auto mode, which is basically the next slide, we're going to be talking about the different modes. It will determine the exposure for you. But if you're in manual mode, right, that dial is going to move, telling you what it thinks is going on. So you have a certain setting, and then it might be at like -1, right? That means that your camera thinks that it's one stop too dark. That's what your camera thinks. Okay. So it's going to tell you what it thinks it's at based on what it's looking at. Is that clear? So when you're on manual mode, it's not going to choose for you, but it'll still give you its opinion. Okay? So you can choose to ignore it, or you can choose to kind of take that into consideration. Okay. Any other questions? Okay. So the different modes that you can be in on your camera. All right, so there's manual, which we kind of did last week. Right, so if you were to just think about exposure triangle on your own and determine your exposure by yourself, you'd be on manual mode. Right, but often that's not really practical. So we use some sort of automatic mode. Okay, there's full automatic, which is any of those like creative, or not the creative, the like the little icons that you see, like of the person running or the landscape or the little green box. Those are all auto modes. Okay, so you have no control in those modes. Okay, and then there's things called creative auto modes, which are for Canon it's AV, TV, P, and B. So AV stands for aperture priority, T stands for shutter priority, I don't know why. P stands for program mode, and then B stands for bulb. Okay? And then ASPB for Nikon, which correspond to the exact same things. Okay? So we will go over what each of those mean. Okay? So in auto mode, you have no control. Okay? Camera sets everything. Okay, that's what you do when you have no idea what's going on. Okay? Program mode, your camera selects everything, but you can choose to change the ISO, and you can choose to do exposure compensation, which is our next topic. Okay, but it basically means it's basically auto, it thinks for you, but then you can choose to make some minor adjustments to it. Just think of it that way. I don't think you ever need to use it. Okay? Now, the one that's really useful for a lot of situations is aperture priority mode. Okay, so what this is you set the aperture, you set the ISO. Okay? You set the aperture, you set the ISO, you let the camera choose the shutter speed for you. Okay? Now, you can also in here do exposure compensation, right? And we'll talk about that later. Okay? Shutter priority mode, you set the shutter speed and you set the ISO, and you let the camera choose your aperture for you. Okay? Manual, right? You choose all three. Camera doesn't have any input, and then bulb is basically it opens the shutter. You set everything, right? And it opens the shutter for however long you're pressing the shutter for. Okay, so it's kind of more of a specialized use. I think a lot of like people who are taking pictures of stars and things like that will use bulb, right? Or if you're doing light painting, you might want to use bulb, right? Light painting will be part of your assignment this coming week. Okay. Any questions about each of these? Yeah.
How smart is the camera if you're going to do automatic?
This is basically what we just talked about in camera metering. It just tries to go to 18% gray.
Okay.
Yeah. And our next or the next big topic is, okay, how do we override what the camera says is right? Okay. All right. Any other questions?
Do not all cameras have the bulb feature?
Not all cameras have the bulb feature. That's a good question. Yeah. So if you don't have bulb on yours, don't worry about it. Yeah. Okay. Anything else? All right. So let's think about like different situations. We're not gonna go through all of these, but I wanted to think. Okay, like what would you use? Would you use? I'll simplify it. So sports photography. Okay, it's really fast paced, right? It's really fast paced. You probably don't want to be in manual. Okay, manual focus or manual exposure mode. You can be in certain situations. I have done that before. But let's say that you have to choose between. Actually, yeah. Okay, choose between shutter priority, aperture priority, and manual. Okay, if you had to choose between those three, for outdoor sports photography, what would you do? And for indoor sports photography, what would you choose? Okay, so partner up with someone, and I want you guys to have an answer for me. I'm gonna ask some people for their opinions. Okay, so I'll give you like 3 minutes to do that. You can get into groups of 3 if you want. Has everyone signed in to the attendance? And where's the other attendance sheet? Okay, all right. So, can I get a volunteer to tell me what you would use or what the person you were talking to would use when you're doing outdoor sports photography? Or I'll just choose someone. Okay, yes.
Taking shutter probably you wanna control taking up and sending right. So you want the camera view as well as you want the control shutter.
So you would set it to a really, really fast shutter speed.
Yeah.
Okay, all right. Any other opinions? Sorry?
Low ISO.
Low ISO, okay. So low ISO, shutter speed priority. and you would let the camera choose your aperture. That's what you're saying, right? Who agrees with that? Okay, who doesn't agree? Okay, can I get your opinions? Yeah.
Since we can control basically the amount of lighting we want to the camera, we should be able to do that versus having the camera automatically for the grade and letting it determine the shutter speed.
Okay, so you would put on aperture priority,
Yeah.
and what would you set your aperture to?
Depends on what I'm trying to do.
Okay. And so what you're trying to do is outdoor sports photography. It's okay, I'm just kidding. I'm just putting pressure. Uh-huh.
If it's like football, you don't want to be standing so close by, so you're probably going to want a narrow depth of field.
Uh-huh.
So it'd probably be like a high aperture.
High aperture number. So let in less light. Low aperture number. Okay. All right. So yeah, there's different ways of thinking here. Okay, already. Okay. Any other things come to mind? I guess there's no technical right answer for this, but there is kind of a right answer that a lot of people do use. So, so I just want to hear kind of how, like your kind of thoughts are on the right track, all of you guys. So far, any other thoughts? So we got like, okay, we can have low ISO because it's outdoors, right? We obviously want to have fast shutter speeds. Okay, that's really important, right? It's sports photography, right? And then, okay, like there's something about the aperture, like in sports photography, often you want to make your depth of field narrow, okay? Because you don't want like the background stuff to appear that much because you want to isolate it on the sports action. Okay, so often you'll use a large aperture, small f number. Okay, so now with those in consideration, okay, any other thoughts? Someone say definitively like this is what we should do.
I mean, you could do a manual.
You could do manual, right? All right. So I'm gonna throw in something. Okay, maybe you guys didn't think about this, right? In outdoor sports photography, you might have both sunlight and shade. Right? What happens then? Right? When you're outdoors, you're not always gonna have sunlight. What happens if a cloud comes in suddenly, right? Or what happens if like different parts of your field are in shade versus sun, right? Does that kind of change your answer for anything? Think about that. A lot of you guys just look really confused. Okay, so personally, I use AB, so aperture priority. Okay, and I consider that to be the right answer. I think it's the best application of it. Okay, here's my reason. Okay, you want your shutter speed to be fast. Okay, I agree with that, right? But that doesn't mean that you have to set it to a certain shutter speed. Okay, you just have to get it to a certain shutter speed, and if it's faster than that, that's okay, right? So I just need like 1/1000 seconds minimum, right? And if it gets faster than that, I'm fine with that, right? But for sure, I want aperture to be big all the time, right? I want my aperture to be big all the time. So if I'm on TV, my aperture might vary, right? And it might become like f11 or something, right? And why would I want that to happen, right? Because here's what I'm imagining. So if I'm shooting outdoors, I will always first expose for the shade, okay? I'll expose for the shade in my AV mode. So what does that mean? I set my ISO so that I have a fast enough shutter speed at my largest aperture. Okay, so I've already set my aperture at the highest setting, and then I point at the shade and I think, okay, look, like if I'm at ISO 400, I can get like 1/1000 seconds. Okay, that's pretty fast, or 1/500 seconds. Okay, so now when I switch over to the sun, right, my camera says, oh, look, it's really bright, so then the shutter speed becomes like 1/4000. Okay, and that's fine, right? That's even better. Okay, but what happens when I do aperture or shutter priority is that I go under and I set my ISO, right, and then it'll say like, oh, like my ISO, sorry, my camera will set my aperture to like f4, for example. Okay, but then when I go to the sun, what happens is that because it's brighter, the aperture has to close up. Okay, so the aperture becomes like f11. Right, and I lose that depth of field, the shallow depth of field, right, that I want in sports photography, which is why I think that AV is preferable to TV, okay, or A is preferable to S. Okay, so that's the kind of thinking that I kind of do for different situations. I think that's one of the most difficult ones to think about because of the whole shade and sunlight factor. Okay, but in most situations, AV will not fail you. Okay, if you know what you're doing, because usually you know how much depth of field you want, right? And shutter speed, you just know kind of a range, like it should be fast or it's okay if it's slow. That's kind of the amount that I think about shutter speed. I don't need it to be like 1/100, right? I don't need it to be a specific setting. Okay. Okay. How about for indoor sports photography? Would anything change then? Sorry. Yeah.
So then you can manually set your shutter speed to be like a bare minimum, and then you hit aperture mode, your camera will keep that in mind?
No. So what I do is in aperture mode, when I'm pointing at the sun, I set an ISO that's fast enough that a good-looking picture there, the shutter speed is already fast enough. It'll only get faster from there, right? Because I go into the sunlight. Okay. All right. So what about for indoor sports photography? Does anything change? Yeah.
So what ISO would you set if you're outdoors?
Oh, it depends on how much light there is. Yeah. I think I'm usually at like 400. Yeah, if I want to get a decently fast shutter speed. Okay. Any other questions? Okay. All right. For indoor sports photography, what do you guys think? Would things change here?
The light is constant.
The lighting would be more constant, right? So this might be a case where you might be able to use manual, right? Because the main downside of manual is that it's slow to change, right? When you get into different lights, like you have to actually manually change it. That takes a long time. You might miss a shot. But for indoor stuff, a lot of times lighting is constant. It's oftentimes when I'm indoors, I'll stick to all manual because I want complete control over my exposure, right? I don't trust my camera because if I shoot like someone who's wearing different clothes, I'm gonna get a different exposure. Okay, to me that's silly. Like, why do I have to deal with that? Okay, so I just, if it's constant lighting, I know it's gonna be constant lighting, I'll just use manual. And for sports, I'll just make sure it's at a fast shutter speed. Okay, kind of make sense? Okay, how to think about this? Right, so okay, I think the first thing that I think about is whether there's going to be changing light or not. Okay, when there's changing light, then you have to kind of put more trust in your camera. Okay, but when there isn't, you can just override all your camera settings. You just use manual. Okay. Okay. Any other questions? Okay, so to leave off kind of with this idea, right? It's always a trade-off between speed and convenience versus complete control and predictability, right? Right, so it's convenient, right, to be in auto mode, right? But you're not going to be able to control what your camera gives you, right? But manual mode is obviously a little bit slower. Okay, so that's always the trade-off that you're going to have to make. Okay, so now we kind of talked about camera metering. How does my camera see light? Now we need to talk about how do I defeat my camera? Okay, like it's giving me the wrong settings. Okay, and I need to use an auto mode. Right, so then exposure compensation is going to allow you to do that. Okay, so on your camera somewhere, you should have a symbol that looks like that, like a little plus minus. Look for that symbol. I have some examples here, like a Canon. I don't know what camera this is, but it might be right around there, right? Like it's usually in that area. Okay. For Nikon, you know, it might be up here. Okay. All right. Nikons tend to be on the top. Everyone found it? For point and shoots, it's usually there. It's different for every single camera. Okay, so it's usually under like menu, and then there might be something that says EC or EV. That's probably what you're looking for. Okay. Not if you found it. All right. Okay. Great. So exposure compensation, what this is used for is to override your in-camera exposure settings, okay, that your camera tells you, okay, because it's going to make errors, okay. I can guarantee that your camera will make errors. Okay, the fact is that you are smarter than your camera, okay. You might not know how to take pictures yet, okay, but you can see things that your camera can't see, okay. So, you need to put that, use that as your advantage. Most cameras going to allow you to do two stops of compensation in either direction. So what that 1 and 2 means is how many stops you want it to change. Okay, so if I turn my dial and make that 1, so you want to hold that button and turn your dial, then that little dial thing will move. Right? Then it's saying, okay, go twice brighter if you do 1 stop, or if you do 2 stops, then it's 4 times brighter. Okay? Right? And so if you think about it, right, let's say you're on AV mode. Okay? You've set your ISO, you've set your aperture, your camera gives you a shutter speed. Okay? But you take the picture and you're like, okay, this is too dark. Okay, I need to brighten it. So then you would hold that AV button, go up to like +1, right, or maybe +2/3. Okay, and then retake the picture. Your camera's going to give you a shutter speed that corresponds with the change that you set. Okay, so it's going to change your shutter speed for you. So it's going to listen to you in the end. So I hear you guys trying it. So yeah, I want you guys to kind of try it out right now. For a lot of scenes with like a lot of whites, so like snow, right? I usually just always set it to +1 because I know it's always going to come out dark, right? And +1 is about kind of a good measurement for the error that it makes. Okay. So actually, if I can get your attention, there's a lab. It's not really specific, okay? But what I want you to do is, there's a lot of dark colored surroundings in here. I want you to go around, take some pictures. Maybe you can partner up with someone, take pictures of each other, right? There's a person, but then the background is all black. Okay, I want you to experience your camera overexposing, okay, and then I want you to fix it, okay, using exposure compensation. And then you can also go outside in the hallway where there's a lot of bright colors, or to the amphitheater, okay, and do it the other way. Okay, it's gonna probably underexpose your picture, okay, and then overwrite that. Okay, and then also try overwriting a lot so that you make an error too. Okay, just try different things with your camera. I want you to get comfortable with that. That's one of the most important tools that I'll probably teach you in this class. Okay, how to override what your camera thinks is correct. Okay, and then if you have time, try experimenting with long shutter speeds because that's going to be part of your homework. Okay, so we didn't really get a chance to try that last week, but if you have time, do that. I'm going to give you 15 minutes. This is also going to be your break. Okay, so you can use the restroom or whatever you need to do. Okay, so we'll meet back here at 2:50. Okay, you have a question? Oh, you can. I try to use AV. Use AV mode, yeah, or A. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Find that. Oh, explain the conversation. So if you're on AV, you're gonna just there's a flash out. Oh, that's a flash. So. Oh. Okay. I need to. Oh, there we go. If you press up, so right now you're switching your aperture, but then if you press up, it switches over to compensation.
I can't find the exposure compensation button, but it's on the menu. So if I go to menu, it's right there. Then I messed with it and it's fine.
Oh, so there's your views? You have something. So what you're going to do is, if you're on AV, so you don't have to worry about this. Just change it.
Regular and
you can join the aperture line, so it's only controlling the shutter.
how did I
Oh, you're on manual right now.
Oh, okay.
You're on AV. Then if you press this, if you hold this, it's going to change the existing.
Oh, okay.
When I hold this down, it just seems to adjust the metering style, but not the like.
Oh, you know, that's the flash exposure compensation. So that's for when you're doing flash. So what you want to do is, so at a certain aperture, you're going to be in post style. You have to make sure that you're on the flash style. Which basically on just means on, but this means that you can use this style. And then when you use this style, you're going to be able to change the exposure.
So this is shutter speed.
Yeah.
So it's kind of too slow.
Yeah, it's pretty slow.
How do I change it?
Well, okay, so you're on AV. Your ISO is probably. So ISO is on 400, so we're indoors, so you probably want to be on 800 or 16. So just go on 16 to be safe. So then at this point, you can also change your EV, right, by holding, sorry, not EV, exposure compensation that I just talked about. It's this thing dial, so just hold this, and then you turn it on. Yeah, so I mean, your shutter speed was too slow because your ISO was too low.
Was I 800 or 16?
You look forward. No, it's okay. Yeah. I mean, if you wanted, to make it faster, you would have to just decrease your exposure concentration. But that would make your picture darker.
So if I want to overexpose it,
Yeah.
Hey, quick question, not related to the lab, but because I was trying to shoot some pictures yesterday. So if I'm in this kind of setting where there's a mix, a lot of lights and shadow, but I'm trying to get the light that's coming through the tree, what would you do at that point?
So you could see the light coming through the trees.
Barely, like it's just light.
It's going to be really hard for the camera to capture that,
Okay.
but you have to underexpose.
Okay.
So if you're trying to shoot light, everything around it should come out like DSLR. Otherwise, it's not going to be able to capture the contrast. It's a very, very light contrast.
Did you make it? Did you make it error?
I can pick up on it, but there's no way your camera can.
We do over there.
Oh, but does it matter like which the evaluation you take?
Right? No, I mean whatever. I mean, this will change what it tells you at that moment, but the concept of the exposure compensation stays the same.
So right now I did I'm in AV. I set the exposure, the aperture to 2.8.
Yeah.
And then if I focus on like focus on somebody like that.
So right now it's giving you a third of a second, right?
But I changed my
Oh, it's because you zoomed
Oh
in.
yeah.
So this camera doesn't do 2.8 throughout. So when you're zoomed in, it's the maximum.
Okay, I see. Okay, so if I do this,
Yeah. So, but then if you want to darken it, then you turn this down. Yeah. One 6 or 1.6 or 1.13.
now it's 110.
Try to down. But yeah, I mean that's basically it. Because that wall is black, so you want it to be black and white.
Someone said ISO, or do you put it on auto?
I usually set my ISO by myself. ISO auto will, it's gonna give me that change. ISO auto puts you kind of quickly on the edge, so you're gonna have a lot of chances for blurry pictures. So it's very good.
So this way, you're saying this is overexposed?
I think that's overexposed. Those blacks are not. That should be good.
you can tell if
You might think that it is because that's kind of how you see in a lot of pictures. But that's actually not right? Those blacks are not black.
But then if like by making those blacks actually black, then the person becomes dark.
Then I mean no, not necessarily. So I mean you have to look at it.
Okay.
Yeah, how do you do the thing where
Long.
yeah, how do you it is
Well, are you on manual? Looks like you're manual.
Yeah, the auto. Yeah. So now you're on creative auto, so aperture priority. So choose your aperture. Now you hold this button.
Oh yeah, I know how to do that, but how do you make it shake? Like move on its own? Remember how it was moving?
Oh, for manual? Well, for manual, you just set it. Something.
What's this? Oh, the
So every time you kind of hold it, it's gonna do like.
Oh, wow.
Like you mean like you manually doing it and going to minus one?
Hold what? The.
Like hold it halfway.
What was that?
So it's right now, I think it's.
How, you know how you said you would, which eye sources do you use?
Yours, I probably use 1600 right now.
And when you take a picture in this shape, how do you know what time of shutter speed it uses?
Oh, you mean after? Oh, on the picture itself, you can do input.
Oh, you have to go back to the picture to check which speed.
Oh, I mean,
Oh.
information's here. And then you can also just, when you take a picture on the or whatever, whenever you hold it halfway, it's going to tell you what shutter it's going
Okay. Yeah, both. Okay, thank you.
Bulb is just literally
So then how would you, do you just set shutter speed, like if you want like a long exposure to do the
yeah, then I would just manual or
manual?
and just set a really long shutter speed.
Okay.
Your camera will probably let you do it for 30 seconds.
30 seconds?
I've done like I think I've done a 20-minute exposure before. That was something like a stargazing assignment. And you have to do like 20 minutes in order for you to get started.
I see a camera?
I don't know what this is.
I'll teach you. Yeah. Whatever.
Yeah.
Are you in this class too?
Yeah.
Then, you,
Oh, I forgot. Is your son also taking this?
yeah.
Oh yeah, right there.
The camera? So I can't set the shutter speed.
Well, in AV, that's the whole thing, right? Like they'll set the shutter speed for you,
I
and
think
then
so.
you're adjusting, saying, "No, it's too slow. You need to go faster."
Don't be jealous.
Don't knock it. Hey, this is a pretty good camera. Actually.
You know that is?
You should show your picture to
I went out there and I focused on something and it gave me that.
Are you sharing it?
I teacher, she has it.
Don't take a picture. Whoever that was. You have a question?
Your camera's so good.
I know, isn't the camera?
Is this it's not me. I'm just learning how to take it. I think cameras are really good. I have no idea what I'm doing.
You're learning?
Yeah.
So like, technically you don't need to
Dance.
use exposure content unless you take a picture of like that. I don't think it's that dark.
Maybe here.
Put to the side.
What shot?
Dude, is this like overexposed to you?
It's hard to tell on here.
Yeah, exactly.
You can do Does it look overexposed?
Yeah.
So just practice.
Not really. It looks fine, but do you know how to do display?
Fancy.
We make it bigger than Zoom.
Oh
Yeah.
no. Oops.
Oh, no, not now.
Like to make the histogram show.
Oh.
Oh.
Oh, okay, yeah.
I would say slightly because the black here should be a little closer. but I mean it's like that's pretty good. Yeah, I mean, that's acceptable.
Okay.
Wait, do you think there is a difference between like different cameras, even though they have the same setting?
There's minor differences because of the lens.
Lens.
Yeah, at the
You
same
don't think
setting.
it's a detector difference? So, like for some reason, I know I set Nikon the same thing, and it just doesn't. That means it doesn't look as good.
If it doesn't look as good, it's probably a function of the lens. It's also a function of the camera because some camera lenses are better. But that's because like if you're indoors, like ISO 1600, some cameras render that better. Like you're getting the same amount of light and everything. The settings are the same, so like technically it's the same. But the image file that comes out of one is gonna look better. That's just because it's like a more advanced sensor. So equipment does matter. Like I'm not saying the equipment doesn't matter. I mean that's why like photographers get expensive. But the theory is like the same.
So then you had to like compensate for whatever.
It's hard to compensate for it. I mean, it shouldn't look darker. It shouldn't look darker. Maybe it looks blurrier or something like that. But it shouldn't look. It should look the same in terms of brightness.
Is what you see on the screen, you know that viewing screen, is that the same as like if you transfer? Yeah.
No, because each picture looks different on different computers. That's a really advanced topic. Yeah, like, I mean, for the time being, all I say to make it simple is that you can't really trust that screen. It'll look different from your camera, your computer screen.
Okay.
But the fact is that no two screens are alike. Yeah, that's
but
really.
Is it normally better than like what you see on the camera?
So I can't say that for sure because some LCDs overexposed, so it looks like it's exposed, but it's actually under because it's brighter than it actually is. Or some LCDs are darker than it actually is. So then it looks like it's okay, but when you look on camera, it looks like actually overexposed.
So how do you check then?
You have to just know that. You have to know that, and there's also another way, which is why I looked at her histogram. That's something I'll cover probably in like 2 weeks from now. But that's another way that's a more objective way of checking it, because it tells you how many points are. It's a histogram of how like the different brightnesses, right? So then that's a way to do it.
I see.
And then I switched to shutter priority just to and I switched back to aperture priority. And even though the ISO is still 1600, the shutter speed went back down. So I'm not sure how I can get it back to so if I just switch to another mode, and I don't think that when I go back to that same mode, like the settings are all the same. Like I mean, the ISO is the same.
Yeah, see, like, take an example. I asked them, and maybe the LCD, like,
well, I don't think.
I'm so confused. I didn't know it's like sensitivity and my first day lost it. That's so fast. I think my brain's so fried after taking it, and I can't follow. I know I took it today and part of the copy, and I was going to work, but I didn't so I'm like,
there's a lot of material this way. It's a pretty high.
what's aperture again?
I think actually, if you do 100 in here, it's too dark. Actually, I think what the camera's doing.
I'm so
Boy, no, it won't have to like all the details of it. Because if I do it at 100 right now,
I needed to practice after the first time because I'm still trying to figure out how to like even maneuver.
no, I went to manual and I set 100. It's pretty dark, so that's probably why.
You were working hard.
Yeah, this is pretty good. We can adjust everything on this.
Yeah. Not the
1600 is not that. There's not that much light.
But the shutter speed on over 60
It's pretty slow. It's because it's not that dark. I mean, it's
So when when I was amateur practicing, my eyes were still my
Don't be his disciple in that way.
It might be because you're putting us in the dark. So I mean, I know what.
Yeah.
That's basically saying that that's still white. That point of the picture is not
Why are you using it?
which means that, you know, if that's a part that shouldn't be white, then you
This one only
I'm
goes
just
down.
still trying to understand what the diameter is.
That's better, right?
That was in law school.
The camera gets all the subjects are.
It's just depending on your lens. It's the limitation of your lens.
It might have been a little too
Some lenses
I
are,
did it too.
like this is a perfect outdoors lens.
Yeah.
Indoors you might have a little more difficulty.
So in this case, you think
It's probably a kit lens, right?
Oh yeah,
It works perfectly. Hey, when would you ever use a +2?
He just used +2.
Oh, for what though? Like in what?
sports
Just
photography.
normal?
I mean, sometimes I think in snow.
I would have figured you would have under.
That's what we thought, but actually, if you just
Oh, how about this? Could you explain one more time to normal, like what you're doing when I do a +1 or 2, or what I'm doing when I do it? Like what am I telling the camera, or what am I telling? What am I doing to
So
my
I'm in
image?
AV, right? I
Okay.
set my ISO, I set my aperture, and it gives me a shutter speed.
Okay,
But I know, either I know or I looked at the picture and it's too low.
right.
I'm saying, dude, like you gave me a shutter speed, but give me twice. Give me something slower if I go +1. Give me half that, so I get twice as much light.
So basically, when you're going +1, you're going -1, you're telling it give me more light.
Yeah. So you're saying,
give me less
or
light.
just basically like make the picture brighter or make the picture darker.
So in a snow picture, can you kind of walk through what the camera's thinking? So you're thinking it's too bright, therefore.
No, I'm thinking the picture will be too dark.
Yeah.
The camera.
It's going to produce a picture that's too dark
so
because
I know
it thinks that the scene is brighter than it really is.
So then I'm actually just telling it, just go, you know, one stop brighter than what you think it's going to be.
And mechanically, is that going to be the shutter speed the camera's going to...
So on AV, it'll be the shutter speed.
Oh, so it depends on what...
Yeah, on TV, it'll be the aperture.
So if it's so you're telling it to give it more light, right? You're going to +1. The picture's going to come out with more contrast. Because like when we took a picture with +1, it looks or +2, it looks like it looks darker.
Sometimes.
It looks darker?
Yeah.
It shouldn't look darker, it should look brighter.
Did it look darker?
For what?
Like when it's +2.
It should be brighter. Unless you change the picture.
Could it be brighter with more contrast?
It might also depend on where I'm metering, right? Like if I focus on the different part of the picture.
Yeah, if you meter differently, it might look... I mean, okay, if you take the exact same picture, it should look brighter. It might look like you have more contrast because you had a lot of dark things, like the snow, right? In the snow, like the person wearing black, in the snow, like the snow was gray and the person was wearing black, so it's gray and black. But if you actually expose it correctly, then the snow is white and then the guy is wearing black, so then that looks like it has more contrast. Right? So you're basically spreading out like the light that it got and you're making it...
So just one more time, so when you're taking a picture of the snow, your camera's going to think it's bright enough so it's going to go down in terms of whatever. So by adjusting it, you're telling it, no, make it brighter.
Make it brighter than you think it's...
And so how's the picture going to come out?
It's going to look brighter. The second picture with the exposure compensation should look brighter.
Just ask him.
Kind of makes sense?
So if you're on a stage and it's dark all around, right? But then the camera wants to overexpose that. So is that why you lower it?
I would do -1 exposure compensation.
Okay, because it would overexpose that, but in reality it's much darker.
But that's
right.
So piggybacking off on top of that. Well, answer her question first, and then you can answer the question.
I mean, it's basically just -1 because I know that the camera's gonna overexpose, so I'm just trying to contain them.
Okay.
Get darker than you think it's supposed to.
Okay. Alright.
So that's only true if it's doing center weighted metering, right? Not if you're doing evaluative. Because if you're doing evaluative, probably, oh yeah, it's still overexposed.
It might. I think it depends on which camera you're using. Okay. That's what evaluative is so confusing.
Right. So for like a stage setting, would you do center
Actually, for
weighted?
stage, I do manual.
Oh, you do?
I do manual.
Wait, so manual will not, it doesn't matter what.
It doesn't matter what it's telling you. I don't even look at it. Because I just know what the right setting is. I just set it beforehand. And then, if the light changes, then I can change a little bit. You have to get to a point where you're comfortable doing it manually. But that gives you way more control. Because if you do use AV in a similar composition, still every single picture you're at the mercy of your cameras. Like whatever it thinks is true.
Okay.
Okay, we need to resume.
With my camera, because I'm trying to focus on it, but it's not focusing.
Yeah, I use manual focus when in a quieter environment. It makes a lot of noise when it's autofocus.
But it doesn't focus?
It does focus, but it makes a lot of like the grinding noise.
Oh, it's probably something stuck in your lens.
Really?
Yeah, you know what? It's not
That noise.
I like this part. I think the back.
get water on it?
No, I took it to the beach yesterday.
Oh, that might.
But I didn't go in the water though.
You go feature? I would just say, just let it air out.
Okay.
It might be like sand.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, let's get back together.
You heard that noise, right?
Oh, that's just.
Can I ask one question? So when you're in an outdoor setting, let's say, and you're just in a situation where it's super hot because of the sky, and I want to get proper exposure so that I get the background, but I also want to get, a decent face cut and stuff. But often I find that it's cool. You blow out the background, in order to get the face, and it's hard to get like both.
Yeah, you need to. Basically, how I do it is I underexpose it so I get the background, and then I'll raise them in post. That's the best way to do it because otherwise, the only other option is to add your own light, which is flash rounds, or there's really no other way. I mean, it just doesn't work with the dynamic range of the camera. It just can't.
So then, what do you feel comfortable doing then in that situation in terms of the ISO? I'm not going to go any higher than.
It's not so much the ISO. It's
you don't even care about that.
Yeah, it's just like it's better to underexpose in a setting where you have to choose. So if you overexpose, it's harder to bring down the lights than to bring down shadows. So I just underexpose the part that's darker, and I just bring it down.
Okay.
It happens a lot for like backlight pictures.
Yeah, or pictures with like daylight and background. It's hard.
Yeah.
Okay.
Are you starting?
Yeah. Okay, let's get started. Let's get started. Or resume. Okay, so it sounds like a lot of you are being challenged in different ways, so that's good. It's good. So that means you're learning something or trying to learn something. Okay, so hopefully, as you actually try to do it, it starts to make more sense. Okay, so one thing I want to say is that exposure, there's no like right answer. Okay, so some people tend to underexpose their pictures. Some people tend to overexpose their pictures. So people who know my pictures, they tend to be overexposed. That's just kind of my style. I like my pictures really bright and contrasty. I like my whites to be white, and I like my blacks to be black. Okay. Other people don't have that style. So I know people at our church who have a different style. Like they tend to underexpose their pictures. Right. So there's no like right answer. Okay. It just you take the pictures that you like. Okay. That's what you end up doing. But what I'm teaching you is the tools to take that picture. Okay. So you might be imagining something, right? But you don't know how to do it on your camera, right? So that's kind of sad. Okay. So then what I'm trying to do is show you how do you take like what's in your head and actually make it come out, on the other end. Okay. So that's kind of my rule. Okay, so your pictures don't have to look like mine. Yeah, I'd rather that they don't, so we can have different types of pictures. Okay. So our next topic, moving on, is white balancing. Okay. It's an important topic because I'm sure you guys have seen pictures of like, especially indoor events, and then all the pictures are yellow, right? They're all yellow. They have like a yellowish cast to it, and it's odd, right? Because from your memory, like the room wasn't that yellow, right? But then the pictures are really, really yellow, okay? Or the pictures turn out like green. Or I've seen some blue pictures too. Like I don't know what happened there, okay? So like I've seen some of the Cornelia pictures that were blue. I was like, whoa, what's going on? So like I asked the guy, and he was like, oh yeah. And then anyways, that was an interesting conversation. But you have to what I'm going to teach you is how do you set your camera to get the proper white balance, right? Because as we talked about in lecture 1, different lights have kind of different warmness, right? So fluorescent lights, right? They're kind of it's kind of a neutral to warm, but it has a greenish tinge, right? If you're under incandescent or tungsten lighting, then it's going to be really, really warm, right? And so that's usually the kind of situation in which you get those yellow lights or yellow pictures. And so we need to be able to compensate for that. Okay. So this is kind of a spectrum. Don't worry about the numbers, but like candlelight and tungsten, that's really warm, right? And on the other side of it is like outside overcast day or shade, right? That tends to be really cool lighting, right? And then everything else is just kind of in the middle. Okay. And then there's a green magenta. So there's the yellow, orange to blue spectrum. But to get more detail, there's also a green magenta spectrum, right, that we can talk about, and that's mostly called tint. You guys don't really have to worry about it, just know that it exists. Okay. All right, so the main purpose is to show you guys the different presets that you have on your camera. So there should be a button on your camera that says like WB, right, and that stands for white balance. So now if you press on that, you should be able to change the settings, okay, among these options. Okay, some of you might not have all of them, and some of you might have more. Okay, depending on the camera. Okay, so look for that, and then look up if you found it. Okay, great. All right, so a lot of different things are available for most of your photography. This should be sufficient, kind of the presets. So now, before I go into each of the presets, some of you might be shooting in RAW. Okay, so how many? Okay, can you raise your hand if you're shooting in RAW? Okay, so if you don't know what that is, you're probably not shooting in RAW. So raise your hand again. All right. Okay, so I'm assuming that you guys run your pictures through a program afterwards, right? Okay, so if you're shooting in RAW, you don't have to worry about this. Okay, because in RAW, you don't lose anything by doing your white balance after you take the picture. Okay, you won't lose anything. Okay, so now for the rest of you, okay, what you're shooting in is probably JPEG, okay, which is kind of the normal file that you're used to for pictures. If someone sends you pictures, they send you a JPEG, right? So a JPEG is a compressed file. So what your camera does is it takes the information from the sensor, it compresses it down to a smaller size. Okay, a picture that comes straight out of my camera raw is 25 megabytes or 26 megabytes. So when I upload pictures, I get like gigabytes of pictures within a couple weeks. So, it's kind of annoying, but it allows me to do certain things that JPEG can't. Because JPEG, as you compress, what it does is it tosses out information that it doesn't think it needs. And part of that information is white balance information. Okay? And so if you have a JPEG and you try to adjust your white balance after you take the picture, your pictures are going to look really, really bad. Okay? You can try it at home if you're not convinced. Okay? It just doesn't work. Okay? So if you're shooting in JPEG, which is most of you, you need to do your white balance before you take the picture. Okay? That's probably, after exposure, you know, the next most important thing is white balance. Okay? So usually auto is sufficient. Okay? Usually auto is sufficient, like for outdoors things, even in the shade. Camera's pretty good at doing that. Now, the main issue becomes when you're shooting indoors, indoors in tungsten lighting. Okay? For some reason, the cameras are really bad at that, and it gives you that yellowish picture. Okay? And I'm sure you guys have experienced that. Okay, so in that setting, you want to change your white balance to the tungsten, right, setting, which is this. Right? So actually, what I want to try right now is in this room, right, this should be fluorescent lighting. Okay, so go to fluorescent lighting on your camera, right, and snap a quick picture and look at it. Snap something that will give you a lot of different colors, right? And that should hopefully look like what this room actually looks like. Is it coming out like okay? Now change it to tungsten. Change your white balance. Change your white balance setting to tungsten, and then take another picture. How does that come out? Comes out really blue. Right? Now, why is that? It's because tungsten lighting is warmer, right? So it's trying to set for tungsten, but what you're actually giving it is a lot cooler light than tungsten. So your picture is coming out to be really blue. Okay? So that's what happened with that one Koinonia set that I saw. He was just on tungsten setting when he wasn't in a tungsten room. So it came out all blue, right? But you know, if you take pictures like that, like the blue pictures, and then you try to adjust it later, it's not going to work. Okay, it's going to look really, really bad. Okay, so make sure you change your white balance. Okay? And so one thing to remember in this course is that as I teach you guys these techniques, I am expecting you to implement it into your homeworks. Okay? So I saw a lot of off-white balance pictures this past week, right? Because I think a lot of you use like desk lamps, right? And those just are like probably tungsten or halogen lighting, right? It tends to be kind of warm, and a lot of pictures were yellow. Okay, so for next week's assignments, you know, your white balance should be correct. Okay. Now, yes.
Would you recommend taking pictures in RAW?
Would I recommend it? Not necessarily. Yeah, it's if you're serious about like processing afterwards, then yes. But for most people, I think it is the level. It takes a lot more of your hard drive space. It takes a lot more time to import your pictures because the files are bigger, and you have to post-process. If you're shooting in RAW, that means you're committing to do some sort of post-processing. So if you want to just take pictures and upload them, then RAW is not the choice for you. Okay? So it just depends on how much you want to do afterwards. Okay? So for people I train up to be more serious kind of photographers, I tell them to shoot in RAW because I think that post-processing is really important, just even minor things, or even just having the flexibility of doing white balance. But for just kind of casual photography or just like a simple event, I don't think that's necessary. Yeah.
You're going to teach us how to do post-processing.
We'll do really simple post-processing and mostly workflow. Yeah, but I would save post-processing for a more advanced class. Or you can just ask me on the side. Okay. So here's your next lab-ish sort of thing. So this is a little more advanced, okay? So there's a setting on your camera that allows you to do a custom white balance, okay? So I'm gonna actually show you how this works. I decided, yeah, this might take a really long time if I let you guys do it, so I'm just gonna do it for you. Okay, I'm just gonna show you what this looks like, and you can either try to do it as I do it, or figure it out using your manual, because each camera is different, and I don't really know how it works in Nikons, actually. So, okay, as you can see, my white balance is off. Okay, it's a little too cool, right? Okay, so I'm gonna set my white balance, but I'm gonna do it using a custom white balance. Okay, so right? Okay. So let's say like I was in tungsten before, right? It's a little too cool. Right? This looks a little more normal. Okay. But I'm gonna switch to custom. Okay. And what that is I take a picture of something that's white. Okay. And I allow my camera to expose for it. Okay, like this. I just take a picture. Okay. And so if I just do completely auto, then it will have exposed for a 18% gray, right? So this should come out to be an 18% gray because it's a white piece of paper. So now, if I look at that picture, it's not 18% gray, it's blue, and my camera knows that. So what I'm gonna do is go to my menu. So in my menu, I have a setting called custom white balance. I choose this picture. I say, hey, this is my 18% gray that I want you to look at. Okay. I choose it. Now, it should be perfect white balance. And this is actually the most correct that you can get. Okay. This is more correct than your fluorescent preset. Okay. So this is actually what I would recommend you use if you can figure out how to do it on your camera. Okay. I think it would take way too long to get everyone on the same page right now. So that should be something that you should look up. Like look it up in your manual. There should be something either called I think it's called Pre on Nikon, and then on Canon it's called custom white balance. Yeah.
Just reviewing that, you're saying if you wanted a custom white balance, you can take a picture of anything that is white.
Yeah.
And then have the camera white balance is based on that.
Yeah.
And the subsequent shot you take in that area would be.
And the important thing is that your exposure compensation there is 0. Okay, you don't want to tell it to get whiter or darker because you want it to get an exact 18% gray. Otherwise, the white balance is going to be off. Yes. You actually only have to fill the middle part, but if it's best to fill the whole thing because remember, if you have other things in that picture, it's going to affect the exposure, right? So it's best to just go your lens, put on manual focus, so it doesn't try to focus. It doesn't matter if it's blurry, and to just stick it really close to the paper, and make sure there are no shadows. Because if there's shadows, then it's going to also affect the exposure. Okay, so this was supposed to be a lab, but I'm actually going to move on. Okay, so you guys can definitely try to figure that out, okay, on your own time. So we're going to go to another topic which is really, really important. Okay, so far we've talked about, okay, how do I get the correct exposure? Like how does my camera now read exposure? You kind of understand that. Okay, now I know how to white balance and get the proper colors. Okay, so the next thing that a picture needs is to be in focus. Okay. So if you have a picture that's out of focus, people don't usually consider it like a great picture, right? Like you're taking a baptism picture or something, and then it's like you focus on the tree in the background. People are not going to be happy. Okay, so this is really important. So your camera has a complete separate autofocus system that's dedicated to autofocusing. Okay, that's completely different from your metering system, right, which is for your exposure. Okay. The thing I want you to understand is that it uses changes in contrast to measure the focus. So what it's looking for is changes in contrast. Okay, so what that means is, like, if I were to try to focus on this, right, it would look at like this, right? This is a clear dividing line. If it's out of focus, that's blurry, right? That dividing line would be blurry. And as it gets more in focus, right, I can actually even simulate it like this. Right? That dividing lines between the things are going to get blurry. And then it's basically what it does is it goes like this, and then it tries to search for the clearest contrast. Okay, that's basically what your autofocus system does. And now I have to stop. Okay. So that's kind of the fundamental way it does it. So a dark situation, situations where there's low contrast is difficult. Okay, so on your camera, you see like different focus points that it's trying to focus on. If you point it just at like this black wall, there's no contrast there. Okay, it's gonna have a really hard time focusing. Okay, you need to give it something to actually focus on. Okay, another situation that's really difficult is like a campfire. Okay, a campfire you have a fire that kind of moves around, and so people's faces, like the shadows, are moving around, right? And as you try to autofocus, the contrast keeps moving, right? So your camera has a really hard time kind of reading that. Okay, so you have to kind of understand that it's looking for that contrast, and it's trying to guess where the best focus is. So you need to give it something solid to focus on. Okay, so that's kind of the first principle. Okay. So now, how good or how well your camera does this depends on your camera, and how many focus points it has depends on the camera. So like a flagship Canon camera or a Nikon camera has like 51 or 61 autofocus points. Okay, all the way down to a Nikon D40, right, which is kind of like the entry level Nikon, right? It has 3 autofocus points. Okay, so you will be limited, by the equipment. Good news is that in most situations, you only need your center focus point, only need one. Okay, so the reason you have 61 autofocus points is because you have these crazy people who are trying to like take pictures of people running into each other like in football, right? And they need like it to be intelligent and guess which autofocus points to use, right? And it needs to be able to cover the whole picture, right? But for most of what we do, you're just kind of pointing at someone's face and making sure that person's face is in focus. Okay, then one autofocus point is enough. Okay, and usually the center autofocus point will be something called a cross type. Okay, which means that it looks for contrast differences in both the vertical direction and the horizontal direction. If in your camera you have like 9 or 11 focus points and you have it on the outsides, those are vertical types. Okay, so that means it only looks for it in the vertical direction, which means your middle focus point is gonna be more accurate. Okay, so when you want to choose one autofocus point to use, you can use that middle one. That's the one that's gonna be the fastest on and most reliable. Okay. Let's see. Now, all autofocus systems also behave differently, so that's something that you have to learn about your camera. The Canon 5D Mark II, that was the one that I have, is a really nice camera, but it's actually really infamous because the autofocusing system sucks. Okay, so it's like some of your cameras, like the mid-range cameras, are actually a lot better at focusing than mine. Right? And so I have to compensate for that when I'm taking pictures. I have to really make sure that it's in focus. Otherwise, a lot of times it's out of focus. So that's something you just have to learn about your camera, okay, how your camera behaves. Okay, and that comes from just looking at your pictures after you take it. Okay, so I do not know all the characteristics of all the cameras, so that's something you'll have to learn. Now, different autofocus modes. Okay, so on your camera, you should have a button that says AF, or something along those lines, or a setting that lets you choose an autofocus mode. Right, and you should have something like one shot, you should have something like servo or continuous, and then you might have something called AI focus or artificial intelligence focus or something in the middle. Okay, and it's really straightforward. So one shot, what it does is it's just you're taking one shot, and you're telling, okay, I'm gonna focus once, and we're gonna take one shot. That's what that is. The other side is continuous focus, often used in sports. It's always gonna be focusing. Your lens is always going to be refocusing. So if your subject moves, it's going to move along with it. Okay? So it's a lot more unstable. You can't choose a focus and hold it there, but it allows you to respond a lot faster to changing situations. AI focus tries to guess which situation you're in. Okay? That's really the difference. And that again behaves differently depending on the camera. So you have to learn kind of what you're comfortable with. Okay? Again, I'm not going to say which one's the best to use. It just depends on what you're comfortable with. Okay, so I often just use AI focus. It's a pretty good compromise. So now, autofocusing technique. Okay, so the most common one is called, well, it's not called this, but it's focus, frame, and then shoot. So you're looking through your camera, you focus on what you want to focus on, right? And then you frame your picture afterward. Okay, because often we want to use our center focus point, like I said, because that's the most accurate one, but you sometimes don't want whatever you focused on to be in the center. Maybe you want it to be on the side. Right? Often a lot of portrait photography will, we'll talk about composition later, but you want the subject to be on the side a little bit. So you'll see like photographers do like this, like see them kind of twitch. It's because they're like focusing and then reframing. Right? So that's a really common technique, but it's not perfect. Okay? So let me show you the geometry of that. Okay, so camera down there, subject down there, I focus, boom, okay? My lens is set. Okay, then I reframe. All right, what happened? All All right, now I'm out of focus. Okay, so when you're working with really narrow depth of field, this might happen. Okay, so just be wary of that. I'm aware of that. I still use this technique all the time. Okay, so oftentimes it doesn't really matter. Okay, but when you're working with like a prime lens, like a 1.4, then it starts mattering, right? Because that depth of field is really narrow. If you're taking a picture of, let's say you're filming a baptism video, right? If I do this, right, then the whole video they're going to be out of focus, right? And that's going to be really annoying. Okay, so those are the kind of situations where you would want to watch out for that. This is the more accurate technique, which is frame the picture first, change your autofocus point so that it's on the subject's face or on the subject, and then focus, and then shoot. Okay, so that takes longer though, which is why a lot of people don't do that. And it forces you to use an autofocus points that's not as accurate as your center one. Right, so that's basically, you know, instead of being here, you'll just pull it back. Right, that's basically what you're doing. So now moving on, what should I focus on? So that's an important question. Just think of whatever you want the person to look at in your picture is what you should focus on. Okay, so for portraits, that is always the eye. Okay, for anything that has anything that resembles an eye, okay, that's what you want to focus on. Because think about when you're looking at someone or having a conversation with someone, you're not looking at their mouth or their nose. Okay, usually you're making eye contact with them. So it's really natural for us to first look at the eye. So in any picture of someone, usually if you do like the scans where they see where they look, it's usually the eyes where it get the most focus. Okay, and it's usually the dominant eye, whichever eye that. Anyways, that's okay. So it's usually the eye that either that's closest to you or just any eye. Okay. So this picture really bothers me actually. Okay, because the eye is not in focus. Okay, I don't know if you guys can tell from back there, but from my computer screen, it's really obvious that his nose is in focus, and like you look at his eye, it's like, oh, it's out of focus, and it kind of bothers me, right? So it's usually you know, when you're looking at a picture, you want to make sure the eye is in focus, okay? But some other examples, obviously, what's in focus is going to draw the person's attention, right? So when you look at this picture, you see like the tree, which is like the blurry tree, which is half of the frame, but naturally your eyes go to what's in focus, which is the tree behind. Okay, so that's just kind of naturally how our eyes move along the picture. Okay, so anything, you want to make sure the eyes are in focus, right? So even if it's not something that's alive, right, you want to make sure the eyes are in focus. All right, and whatever is in focus becomes the subject of the picture, right? So here it's the dust on the fan, right? It just does. Okay, that's how you communicate what the picture is of. Okay, is what you choose to put the focus on. Okay. So this is our last lab for today. I want you guys to practice autofocusing when you want something in focus on the side of the picture. Okay, so use both techniques. So try doing center focus and then moving it, and also changing your autofocus point. Before you do that though, okay, I'm gonna give you your homework, okay? Wow, it's a lot of text. Okay, so 6 photos, okay, due this week. The first 2 pictures are the first bullet, okay, which is I want you to take a picture of something. Okay, this can be anything. This is more of a technical thing, a technical assignment where you take a picture of something in good lighting, okay, and then I want you to put yourself in a situation where it's really, really hard to take that picture. Okay, you need to do some like long shutter speed. You need to compensate in some way, like high ISO. Okay, so I want you to go from like a well-lit subject, right, but they could take a picture of the same thing in a really, really dark situation. So one thing could be like, you know, your car outside during the day and then at night, okay, when it's like completely dark. Okay, so try that. It can be indoors too. It doesn't have to be outdoors. The second thing is I want you to submit 4 pictures of creative blur. Okay, and so some different things you can do are light trails, light painting, panning, right, which is like, you know, like a car's moving, so then you pan with it and you do a longer shutter speed, and the car's in focus while everything around looks like it's blurred out. Okay, so you can try that. Intentional motion blur, so like either like landscapes of water running, or you know, you can try a lot of different things. Okay, I'm not gonna. I've seen some of Lennon's light painting. It's pretty good. All right, so you can get ideas from his Flickr. All right, yeah, or anything else that involves blur. Okay, I just want it to involve some sort of blur, okay, and long shutter speed. Got it? Okay, so after you do this lab, basically you're free to get ready for service. Okay. Where's the other attendance sheet? There's one more, right? Oh.